Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where it's about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Riverdale. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So I really enjoy how this episode was structured. Obviously, we get it's like any episode, but it's typically never this locked down with the different groupings of characters like we got this episode. And I was watching the entire episode. It was halfway through the episode, I was like, there's something I watched fairly recently that had a similar story structure of people getting stuck together and you bounce between different pairings. I couldn't remember what it was, but eventually I remembered it was the Republic of Sarah. It's the episode where everyone gets snowed in and they're stuck in these respective places, like certain groupings and stuff in pairs. So it kind of reminded me of that, but because I thought it was interesting, immediately they started off where, Jug, Archie, Tabitha, and Betty are all sitting down, right, we're going to try and make a coup to go after knock Percival off his pedestal, and they're trying to gather up support to go for Ronnie, Veronica, Reggie, Tony, try and get Kevin back on their side, Fangs, to try and rally support behind them. But Alice, being Percival's eyes and ears, ended up reporting, because Betty knows that Alice is working with, but she doesn't actively know that Percival is her eye, is constantly his little eyes and ears. She doesn't know that that's the status that Alice has, but she tells Percival there's a fog rolling in, interesting timing, and that fog ends up locking everyone in because it's pretty thick fog, and it kind of works to Alice's thing of right now orders are being put out, everyone stay at home, and did that so that Archie and them couldn't gather like they wanted to, so everyone's stuck in their respective situations. So let's break down the different groups. Obviously, these aren't in any order. I'll talk about them as they kind of come to my mind of which ones I want to discuss. First and foremost, I'll start off with Betty and Archie. So Betty was already dealing with some stuff of for one, we noticed pretty early on, it's oh cool, she's checking the calendar and marking off. I was like, is that about, are you potentially pregnant? Turns out that's totally it. She also got some other news this episode, which we didn't dive into, but I'm sure we'll deal with it soon enough in the future, is that Betty had a coworker point out, there's a woman who also escaped from TBK. So Betty wants to talk to her, but didn't get to talk to her this episode with the fog and everything, I'm sure. But it's going to be interesting because this episode we did learn how Betty actually got away from TBK, which I thought was fascinating, because she hasn't talked to anyone about it. I actually thought we were going to get more TBK this episode because she saw someone in the fog, which I'm like, it is TBK, isn't it? He's back in town, and he's probably still keeping an eye on Betty. Because when they zoomed out of bed, I think it was Archie's place, when it was when they zoomed out and it was Betty and Archie talking, I thought we were going to see TBK outside, but that totally ended up not being a thing. But I think he is probably back in Riverdale, and just Betty doesn't know it yet. But Betty opens up about what happened, how she escaped. And I think it speaks so many volumes about how she described it. She's like, it wasn't anything great or heroic. How I got out, he offered me a chance. He told me, I want you to dismember this body, and if you do it, you get to leave. If you don't, you become the next victim. You get dismembered. And so, he pushes her to do it, and she does it. And Archie tells her, it's okay, you did what you had to do to survive. Because at the end of that, he let her go simply because it's right, now that I know you did that, we're kindred spirits. The world is going to be so much more interesting with you out there. And so Betty's beating herself up about what she did there. And I think it's interesting because I think that in itself kind of culminates a lot of what Betty's kind of had to deal with over the course of this series, because she's always had to deal with the darkness is in her. And I think this all circulates to the fact is that why TBK took an interest in her is that darkness that's in her, the darkness she's always had to battle with, because this is all about coming to terms with also the fact is the correlation is, her family's darkness, the Cooper, just the Coopers alone, it's her dad being the serial killer that he was, her brother, her having this super, the serial killer gene, even the fact is that, she has the power she has, where it's I see threats. Well, it's because you can think of, it's almost, and I don't know if I made this direct correlation before, I might have, but I'm going to reiterate it here if I did, I apologize, but I always think of when superpowers are out, I think of the show Misfits. And the reason why I think of the show Misfits is because I feel like when people get superpowers, it's correlated to their character aspects. Once again, the greatest example I can use is like Simon. What was Simon's ability? Turning invisible. Because Simon was always invisible to other people. He always felt invisible. He was always very like meekish and quiet. So like his power was very reflective of his personality. So I think it's a fascinating correlation that could be made here, that Betty's power, because of her circumstances, her family's circumstances, the darkness in her, that kind of understanding of killers because of her family circumstances, it almost plays into the fact is that characteristically having the power she has. I think the same thing can be broken down about. I think you could probably make the same comparisons like with Archie, Tabitha, Jughead, and Cheryl. But regardless, like I said, I going back to my point, I think that's why Betty almost has like this shame about how she got away, because it's like, right, I didn't fight back, because like she's always been a fighter, so maybe for her it feels like, right, I didn't fight back then. The only reason why I got out, it wasn't even because of me, it's because he pushed me to do something, and it shows like she's like, maybe I'm dismembered, like, you know, mentally, but Archie was like, no, you're not. You did what you needed to do to survive. And now, and I'm sure that's going to be a concern of Betty's. It doesn't really come up this episode, but right, like look how her brother turned out. Her brother, Charles, when it comes to like the whole, the serial killer gene and everything, and her dad, like that must be a concern somewhere in the back of her mind. And maybe it'll come up when later on, you know, with her powers, depending on how long they stick around, maybe it might be the point she sees a baby and she's like, oh my God, my baby, like I see an aura around, there might be something there. We'll see how that plays out, but, or maybe it'll be a thing of she sees the aura around herself as maybe it's like she's potentially a threat to her baby. Like there could be like some story stuff they do like that, or that's just me really overly thinking. We don't know because Betty hasn't decided what she's going to do. Because Archie's like, however things play out, I'm by your side 100%, because they were also discovering like, right, how do we define ourselves? Like, are we actually dating? And he was like, right. He's like, I really like spending time with you. So like, yeah, I think, and neither one of us is seeing anyone else but each other. So, but Archie opens up about, and is like, I love this conversation about why am I still in Riverdale? He's like, I have every reason to leave Riverdale, considering everything that's happened to me. This town is poisoned. This town is cursed. I could easily go somewhere else. I'm like, have a fresh start, a town that just isn't cursed. But the reason why I stay is because, he's like, the reason why I even bought my dad's house is because I want this place to be the place, because it's home. I want this to be the place I raise my family. You know, you and me together, like raising children together. That's what I want. That's always what I've wanted for this. And so that's why I fight so hard for this town, to have it so that this town can be saved, so I can have a place I can raise my family. So I thought that was kind of a beautiful thing. And so at the end of it, you know, the stinger in the episode is we don't know which way it is. Because I had to rewind it because I was trying to see what their expression was. But I think their expressions are still middle ground enough that at first it looked like there might have been some like drop in like their face, like, oh my God. But I think it's like, it's just probably more a face of, oh my God, which way is it going? Like, we're shocked either way. Like, oh, like either is it shocked that, oh, it didn't work out, or shocked that it did. It's going to be interesting because you also have to think about, in comparison to Riverdale, the pregnancy situation, what that turned out to be. Because if I'm not mistaken, yeah, because Betty and Archie got pregnant the first time, but they lost the baby. Cause wasn't it almost like, yeah, it was almost like she never was, like, people's bodies were like, no, that was after the fact. It was almost like she wasn't pregnant at all. That's what happened. Because I was about to say, I was trying to remember if that was like, no, like, because sacrificing Archie is what led to the baby getting born, which, interesting enough, the whole conversation about sacrifices, we'll go ahead and jump to that afterwards and move into the whole Tabitha and Jughead thing. Jughead's having a conversation with Tabitha about like, okay, like, did you ever think about going back in time and trying to stop the bomb? And Tabitha's like, I did, but, you know, we don't know the ripple effects and stuff. It's your typical timey-wimey stuff of like, right, you don't know what the ripple effect is. You never know how things are going to play out. So it's like too dangerous in that regard. Because, right. Because he wants his hearing back, you know? he can still hear people's yes, but he doesn't want to just use his powers to do it. And the look on top of his face, I'm like, did you lie to him? Why would you do that? And so we get an answer to that later on, but the entire episode, she was kind of acting a little off, especially when she was like, I don't want to lose him. And then Jughead's like, you're not going to lose Pop. Like, Pop Tate's probably going to, like, outlive all of us. She's like, wait, you're reading my mind? He's like, oh, sorry. She's like, that's an invasion of privacy. It's kind of messed up because it's like, right, I get it. That's the only way you could communicate, but don't do that just like, he's like, sorry, you know, I slip up every once in a while. And because of that, I kept being like, oh my God, is he going to end up hearing her thoughts about her lying about the whole time travel thing? Like, in the regards of, like, because you could tell she was hiding something. So I was like, is she lying about it? But why? I was like, did she... Because I felt like if she was lying about it, it must be because it's like, no, it's necessary. Because it's similar to the end result, but I was like, she had to lie because it had to be a thing of Jughead needs his powers. And he totally does. Which I shall also know, I love that this episode straight up was like, yeah, this is pretty much Infinity War / Endgame of like, she played the Doctor Strange aspect. She didn't see as many possible futures. That's still a lot. You know, it's not like she's seen like 14 million. I watched a clip of it recently. I don't remember off the top. It's like 14 million or something like that he saw. It's like, yeah, but it's still like 1,000 and something, like 1,000 or so different scenarios in which she ran. Especially considering the fact that her powers are so limited in the radius of like she can only like, you know, Pops is still her ground, like it's still her totem for it. And the fact is that it's only within a certain radius of Pops that like the power like really kind of works and allows her to time travel. So also shows that she does have a lot more. I mean, it makes sense after all her time travel adventures last episode that she would have an even bigger and better control over it after everything, because she's probably been practicing for the upcoming battle. And part of me wonders, is there some correlation there? Like she was, and now, because at first I was like, oh, now it makes sense why she was freaked out when she didn't hear from Jughead. She went outside like shotgun in hand. Jughead's like, whoa, were you coming to find me? She's like, yeah, you were taking so long. I was like, wow. I was like, she really, I got the radio situation probably freaked her out. Now in retrospect, we now know. She did go back in time to try and stop the bomb, but it's an inevitability. That bomb is a fixed point. Well, that was her initial thing. Like, it's a fixed point in time. It needs to happen. But she was also saying that Jughead, she moved things around so that Jughead isn't there. But the problem is they need Jughead's ability. In the, 1,300 plus outcomes she saw, they lost every time. It still ends up being the nuclear apocalyptic situation that Riverdale eventually will end, because Percival will win. Because everyone's powers plays a role, but... it turns out Jughead is the literal Tony Stark / Iron Man, which very befitting comparison, I think. Because like Archie's definitely the Captain America of the situation. I wonder what that would make Betty. I was like, well, I'm about to say like, not as maybe Veronica would be the Black Widow. And Betty would be the... I can see Reggie being the Hulk in that regard. Cheryl could definitely be like the Scarlet Witch of the circumstances. But I guess even just like OG, of even the OGs, I'm like, Avengers, I'm like, who could she be? I'm like... Huh. That's really, like I said, like, because you can immediately go like, oh, well, Tabitha's like the Doctor Strange of it. She really is. But it's like, yeah, you could definitely like allocate like Avenger roles to everyone in this regard. I'm really leaning into the Reggie being the Hulk, and because especially if he ends up getting superpowers and it's superhuman strength, I'm gonna be like, well, I mean, to be fair, Archie, well, you know, to be fair, like Steve Rogers had the super soldier serum, so it's almost it plays out in that role. But it's like, yeah, if Reggie gets like superhuman strength or something and becomes like the Hulk, it's very beneficial, especially if like Veronica is sort of like the Black Widow of the situation. I mean, I guess like Betty could be too. I mean, I guess it's not Avengers because, you know, they haven't been set up yet. But I guess, like, if you were going Marvel standards, I guess you could almost be like, I guess that almost makes Jughead. I mean, he's kind of like a combination of, like, Echo and, I mean, obviously Echo's been set up in the Marvel, but the person I was thinking of was, like, because of the telekinesis, not telekinesis, the telepathy, it's like, Xavier, just the artist that he is, and the writer and stuff, like, I don't know, but also, like, I was like, well, because, like, doesn't Emma Frost have telepathic abilities, too? Once again, I'm going on a huge tangent. But it's just, I just thought it was kind of interesting the comparison you can make. But it's like, just focusing on the Avengers of the MCU specifically, he's definitely like, he's playing like a Tony Stark role. I thought was kind of fascinating. And it's like, what, spoilers for Endgame, Tony sacrifices himself. So it turns out we've got that same thing, except where there was only one reality one timeline where they won. And that was when Tony sacrificing himself. In this one, it's two, but they end up with the same result of Jughead has to die. He dies in both situations. His sacrifice is a necessary thing. I'm like, that's rough. And the thing is that written in stone? So far, that's all Tabitha can find, but it's like, and now Jughead understands why she didn't say anything, because she's like, right, saying it would be admitting it, because for one, I could go back in time and make it so that you don't lose your hearing, but it's like, if I don't, we won't win this. And when I do, I've seen two realities where we win, and those two realities involve you dying and having your abilities and dying. So it seems like that's going to be an end result. So they're going to have to figure that out going forward. You're like, wow. Because so many references, because like I said, I got some in-game vibes from that. You also have Reggie referencing oh yeah, this is something straight, with the fog and everything. He's like, oh, straight out of the Stephen King, which is interesting because it's right, the fog is a different thing. I don't think that's Stephen King related, but that is a movie, because I know there was the remake with Tom Welling, was that the early 2000s? No, I'm thinking about it's 2005, 2006. But obviously Stephen King wrote The Mist, which I referenced that recently. I don't remember what I was watching the TV show From, and I referenced certain aspects of it. Slight spoilers. Certain aspects of From made me think about The Mist. I'll just leave it at that. Or at least that's what I start correlating certain theories I had based around kind of The Mist, Stephen King's The Mist. But kind of moving into Reggie and Veronica's circumstances. They're both at the casino by themselves, and Veronica's trying to convince him to stay. It's right, a game of strip poker, not unless that's what you've been playing with the wise guys. And it's oh, the lights go out. She's like, oh, that was a sign from God. And I love Reggie being or a sign from the devil. And it's once again, we know what your circumstances were connected to the devil himself in Riverdale. But they start doing their thing, and it's okay, they're slowly repairing their relationship. They're in the good place. And then you get to that awkward point where, the moment they cut back to Hiram's photo just staring, I'm like, yeah, that's going to be a little awkward. And even Reggie looks at it, he's like, can we go somewhere else? I'm like, yeah, it's going to be a little weird, especially because, right, that was your ex-boss at one point in time, and Hiram's always got that, you see all the hell he put Archie through. It's going to make you feel a certain way. And then before they could continue their thing, it's right. Veronica's right, maybe it was a little premature of me to break us up. We break up, so let's try and make this work. And it's right, Reggie doesn't want to argue, but some issues come up because Reggie's yeah, I want you to take down that photo of your dad. It's she's what, why? It's you know what this symbolizes. He's right, it's above my desk, constantly looking over my shoulder. She's all right, fine. He's okay, cool. Can we do it now? She's wait, right now? He's yeah, I don't trust that if you don't do it now, there's no guarantee you will do it later. She's what the hell does that mean? He's and then I thought it was really insightful what Reggie pointed out, and I thought it was so fascinating. He's honestly, I do care for you, Veronica, but the fact of the matter is we're stuck in this cycle. The fact is that we're playing out your family's marriage and your parents' marriage. She's I'm not my mom. He's no, you're not. You're your dad. And you're ooh. And he's and it's not just you. It's on me. I'm playing out my family's cycle too. My mom was so consumed by her career, she never made time for my dad, and you can see that they're both doing that. It's right, you can definitely see the reflection of both of their families' relationships there, and it's maybe on some level, I'm not saying excuses, but I'm curious, is that why Reggie's dad ended up kind of being, for a long time, the abusive bastard that he was? I wonder, was there some correlation of just life just not working out, and he just needed to lash out at someone, he took it out on Reggie? I'm curious, is that what that ended up being? But I thought that was so interesting. And Veronica's right, maybe it's a good thing we do end things, because it's the only way we're going to break ourselves of this cycle of this toxic relationship we're in. So, and I love Reggie saying, for the first time in forever, I'm finally seeing things clearly. And I was like, man, that kind of sucks, because initially it was a whole conversation about right, we're a consolation prize, which I love. Veronica was like, we're all someone else's consolation prize. I broke up with Archie because Archie was never going to choose going to New York with me over staying here in Riverdale. And then Reggie was like, okay. Because like, he always felt like, right, first I was always in a relationship. I always felt like, and understandably so, like why he feel that way, because it was like, right, Veronica and Archie broke up. Her and Reggie got together, and then eventually like that didn't work out, and then like Veronica and Archie kind of got back together, but then it was like, okay, and Veronica and Reggie, and it's like, nope, that's not going to work out again either. But Reggie always had those insecurities about like, I mean, hell, because that was even a thing in Riverdale as well, of his insecurities about the whole Archie situation. And so for him, it's like, right, if things were perfect in your world because you wanted to move to New York and everything, who would you have taken with you? And she's like, it's a moot point. He's like, who would you have taken? She's like, Archie wouldn't have left here. So, he's like, all you had to say was you, Reggie. I would have taken you. And like the fact that she couldn't even say that speaks volumes. And it's just like, right, we're actually, the reason why we're so good together is because we're so bad together. So I was like, that's interesting. And even at the end of it all, Veronica decides like, right, she's going to put up the photo of her dad, because it's like, right, I need to break the cycle of, because that was a cycle she had with her dad. Like they had their own tumultuous cycle of just like that love-hate relationship that they had, like how toxic it was, of like the back and forth, because there was a conversation that the psychiatrist who visited the school at one point in time, played by Gina Torres, that psychiatrist was like, right, you need to break free of this like back and forth you and your dad had. And she was kind of free of that for the first time, because she was even saying like if she was living in New York, she'd have her dad too. So like things probably wouldn't have played out the way they did. But she's trying to, I think, finally now kind of breaking free of that cycle, because I think even after all the time skips and stuff, she still was caught up in that last season and everything. So there is that. Then let's jump into the whole Cheryl situation, which, lo and behold, who returns? None other than Mommy Dearest. I was like, interesting. Well, we did get Penelope in that, like, world that, in Cheryl's mind when Abigail had her locked in her own mind. So now her mom's back. In fact, her mom, after being banished, she ended up going to the Himalayas, where like the main place of the Sister Quiet Mercy. And it's like, oh, you got to be kidding me. Which obviously Cheryl's going to feel a strong way about that. It's like, oh, the place you sent me where they kind of drugged me and locked me up. Once again, for what purposes? Oh, because I was gay. It's like, yeah, you're going to feel a certain way. And it's like, oh, you went off to them, especially after everything with your whole church situation didn't work out too. It's like, okay. And she's trying to start a new leaf. She's about to be like welcomed in, and she's like got a day, like got some like vacation time to come and like clear the air, like any unfinished business. And for Penelope, her unfinished business is her and Cheryl. Like they've had such, I've said this world so much, but obviously I was about to say tumultuous. Volatile is the word I'll use. The most volatile relationship between mother and child in existence. It's like, no wonder Cheryl's kind of jacked up the way she is when she has like such a like physically, mentally, and emotionally abusive mother like that. So she wants to kind of have a fresh start, but Cheryl just can't find herself. She can't believe her. And when she just lets her guard down, fine, you can stay here, get you a home-cooked meal and everything. It's like, oh, where do I find you? Around there with the Julian doll. She's like, oh my God, I can't believe you kept it. It's like, right, she doesn't know all the ins and outs of it. I was scared the entire time, like, oh my God, she's going to end up taking it for whatever reason. Abigail's going to end up possessing her. She still's going to aim for Cheryl's body, but I thought like that might be like the result she goes for, but Cheryl at that moment's like, oh, I should have known. You can't change. What are you going to do? You're going to gaslight me like you always do, mother. Nah, bump that. We're not doing that. Takes the candle off the candle holder, and whacks her across the head. How very Clue-esque of me. It's like, oh, it was Cheryl with the candle in the blah 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 room. It made me think of Clue. And then Cheryl shows off her powers. It's like, you would almost think too. It's like, yeah, and your mom probably was super thinking that's super demonic, you controlling fire and everything. So it's like, yeah. And I love that for Cheryl. It's like, right, our relationship, you were always the dragon and I was the maiden stuck in a castle. Now it's not even our roles are flipped. I'm both. I'm both the dragon and the maiden. So, oh, you feel your body temperature rising, Mom? It's like, oh, it's like 114. Ooh, now 122. It's like, yeah, this is my power. I'm a pyrokinetic, so I want you to suffer. But it's like, right, I came here. Don't you want your gift? All those letters from Heather, which is like, oh, that's heartbreaking, because who knows where Heather is now? Like, Heather could be off happy, and because the moment the Heather stuff came out, I was like, oh, could that be like, you know, a fresh start for Cheryl, you know, picking up like with an old flame, like obviously getting those letters, and you see her read all of them and she bursts into tears, because for so long she never heard anything from Heather. But that's because Heather, like, not only did her mother scare Heather off, but it turns out no, Heather was contacting you the entire time, and you never got any of her correspondence because of your mother. And now it's probably a thing of Heather probably gave up eventually, because she's like, right, you're never going to reach out to me, you know. It's like because she can never come physically, and it's like, wow. And her mother's asking for absolution, asking for forgiveness. And it's like Cheryl, even tears in her eyes, like, why did you hate me, Mom? And she's like, because I saw too much, like, when I looked at you, I saw, I guess, she saw something inside of Cheryl that she didn't like. I guess it was like too much of a mirror staring back at her. Because I'm sure when she sees Cheryl, she saw so much of her own, because she had her own life, and how much, like, her life was, like, uprooted and thrust upon her when she was kind of forced to be with Clifford. And that and what that kind of did to her, it probably broke her on the inside and made her mean-spirited. And when she looked at Cheryl, she probably saw the potential, like, right, this is who I could have been, this is who I would have been. And Cheryl was just a nasty reminder that she specifically was like, right, the monster that I was. I guess it's like, right, seeing the beautiful child she had, it just made her go like, oh, like, you have everything that I had at one point in time that was taken from me. You have it. She grew resentful towards her. And because Cheryl was nothing like her, it's like, right, I'm this monster, and you're kind of, yes, but I think Cheryl kind of acquired some of her mom's qualities. Also, like I said, I think that's because of her mom's treatment of her. But I'm also like, that monster thing I thought was interesting. To be fair, Cheryl's done some, like, she's done some Queen Bee, like, level, like, shady stuff, but she's never gone, because I love that she's like, oh, you're talking about, oh, the sisters of quiet mystery taking in the ex-dominatrix, the felon, the serial killer. I'm like, yeah. Like, Cheryl's had, like, her shadiness, but, her mom's a whole other league, so because at that moment her mom's asking forgiveness, we never got back to it in the episode, because that was the last we got of that. But I was like, she don't kill her mom, because I like the next time we cut back to it, Penelope's like a pile of ash, and because Cheryl burned her up. But it might be like, no, Cheryl's going to forgive her, because it's going to allow her to finally fully let go. It's like, I'm gonna cut ties with you, Mom. Go do whatever you want to. I forgive you. This way, I'm not harboring all this hate. And once again, maybe this gives her an opportunity to reach out to Heather. Once again, we don't know what life is like. Maybe Heather found someone, already moved on, married. Very much kind of similar, kind of another comic book reference. Kind of like Doom Patrol, everything with Larry and, God, what was Home Dude's name? The person that Larry was having the affair with back in the day, back before he became Negative Man. I'm sure, well, before the radiation and the whole plane situation. Like, he found him and it's like, oh, like, he fell in love, ended up having a family, I believe, so he got to live a life, and so Heather's probably living one now. It doesn't mean it still can't work out. I mean, but also it's like, well, you have your ex Tony off with her own life, baby, son, which that's a complicated thing, which we're going to get to in a second. So I'm curious to jump back to this next episode to find out what's going to happen with Cheryl and Penelope. Like, Penelope was going to be leaving afterwards anyway, so, and also was no Nana Rose, so I'm curious what those conversations would have been like. And once again, that Julian doll is still in play with Abigail's soul, so there could be something there before Penelope leaves, but we'll see. And then finally, let's move on to the Kevin situation. It's more so the Kevin, Tony, and Fang situation, as they're dealing with, like, right, the custody battle that's going on. And that's always the sad thing. Like, I think there are probably plenty of examples of very, like, pleasant and okay custody battles, but I feel like so many often than not, custody battles get nasty. Like divorces, they get, but I'm also basing that on, like, I'm only basing that mainly on celebrity, like, divorce and custody stuff, simply because they get nasty, because it's also like, right, that probably happens a lot more than we're aware of, because celebrities are celebrities, whether it's actors or whatever, they're in the public eye, so it's become such a big issue. So, but I love that Tony was like, oh, like, because Kevin's like, oh, this is all about protecting baby Anthony, you and Fangs are still serpents. I love Tony was like, yo, you want to come with the heat? I got the heat for you, Kevin. What about all that stuff you do, like you cruising and stuff? It's like, that's some very dangerous behavior, because you're like randomly hooking up with people you don't know about, like, and that's landed you in danger. They didn't show it, but they show a part of it when he was at that sauna or wherever. They didn't show it in the episode, but they show part of it. The guy beat the ever living shit out of Kevin, like, because of that. And it's like, right, you put yourself like. And sadly, Kevin has done that time and time again. He's put himself in very dangerous situation because he's trying to fill some void inside of himself. I mean, that's a conversation that's come up too, like why Fangs has such an issue with Kevin, especially when Kevin like cancels the meeting. Because, right, Tony wants to come at this from a different perspective. She wants to like there to be like equilibrium, like the 3 points on the triangle built around baby Anthony. We all care about baby Anthony. We want the best for baby Anthony. So let's work together as this equilibrium triangle, as a unit, as this co-parenting situation we've all kind of got going on. She wants to come at it from that approach. She's even suggesting, like, right, let's talk to Kevin about the fact is rebranding the Serpents. Because I don't think I talked about this last time. She wants them to be more a activist group rather than the gang that it was. But for Fangs, it's like, no, I want my son to be able to, like, protect himself, because I want him to be able to grow up like we did. But, it's like, what if the ghoulies come after him or whatever? I want him to be able to protect himself. It's like, well, 99.9% of the ghoulies are dead, except for like Twyla, but, which this could always be an issue. But also, who were they killed by? Cops. I don't want my son a part of a gang just for cops to have some excuse to put him down if he's mixed up in all of that. Which even Fangs is like, yeah, but, being an activist doesn't, could still always put you on the wrong side of the police as well, which Tony admits, yes, that's possible, but at least the likelihood is at least a little. I'm sure there are probably statistics on like how you could probably like range that, but it's like it definitely would be lesser than that if he was part of a gang. So that kind of an impasse there, but at the very least, let's kind of focus on the co-parenting situation. But when Kevin bails at the last minute, Fangs is like, this is him doing it again, because this is all for them. It's like Kevin's the one that steered the pot. He's the one that started all this. And now when we want to have a conversation with him and sit down with him about this, what does he do? He bails, because he bails on everything. Because Fangs is coming into this with like a lot of heat towards Kevin. It's like, right, our marriage, we try to make it work, and Kevin just kind of did his thing. And so it's like, what does Kevin do? He kind of abandons, and and I think maybe that's maybe because doesn't Kevin have it's been a while since they've touched on it. Kevin has a complicated relationship with his mom, doesn't he? Like, didn't his mom end up leaving because she's in the military, or wasn't in the military, so it wasn't. Oh yeah, because like the whole affair situation came up between Kevin's dad and Josie's mom, and that led to like kind of a nasty, like, I think, divorce situation there. But I think it's just there's something, like, I guess, like when it comes to his own love life and stuff, like maybe it's just Kevin's trying to feel something with all like the random hookups and everything. So, and I think that's what's happening here. Percival is pushing those like negative, like those feelings inside of Kevin to fill his void, because now he's filling that void with baby Anthony, and he's trying to almost like monopolize baby Anthony to some extent. And he's also kind of weaponizing against people he cares about, Tony and Fangs. Fangs is someone that he's been in a relationship with Fangs for a long time. They've always had their thing, and then also on top of that, you were married, like, and for things to kind of get to the point that they are. Because even Tony tried to talk Fangs down, like, no, it's okay, everything's like, even if we can't get Kevin to sit down and talk to us, it's like, I don't want you to end up in jail again, because that's not good for baby Anthony. Baby Anthony needs his father around, so let's work together. And if Kevin doesn't want to like cooperate, you know what we can do? We're going to take this to the courtroom. He wants to fight dirty, we can fight dirty. So let's try and go things at this approach. But Kevin ended up running into Moose, and I was like, yo, look at Moose. I was like, I mean, I kind of forget like how well how in such great shape the actor who plays Kevin is. Because when he was in that shirt, I was like, oh, that shirt looking a little tight on him. I'm like, yo, I forgot, like, he's in really good shape. But like, I was looking at Moose, I was like, yo, homie, like the 5 o'clock shadow and the stubble, and I was like, you looking yoked, my dude. I was like, when's the last time we saw Moose? And I was trying to remember, I was like, is it season 4? Because I know like Moose's story connected to like the preps, the whole Stonewall prep situation, but like some of season, because I know season 4's story ended up bleeding over into season 5 because of the pandemic and everything. But I'm like, did Moose ever pop up in season 5? Is this like our first time seeing him post? I'm pretty sure it's the first time we see him post time skip, right? Once again, it's just like, yo, look at you, my dude. I wonder is it just because, I mean, for one day, last time we saw him, he was a teenager going into college. No, they weren't college yet. They were still like in high school at the time. So it's like, right, you know, because now the actors get to be basically about their actual ages. You know, they don't have to pretend to be like, oh, like 19 or early 20 pretending to be a teenager. Like most situations, most television, because very rarely will TV shows actually cast someone like, I get it too, because that way it's like you'd always have to be moving the goalposts with the character too, because you'd always have to move, because actors get older in real life and stuff. Like, I get that, but regardless. And him and Moose spending time together. It's like, and Moose references like, yeah, I didn't handle things the best way when my dad was pretending to be the running around as the Gargoyle King. And Kevin's like, yeah, I remember that vividly because it scared the living crap out of me. It traumatized me. It's like, yeah, I'm sure Kevin's been through a lot to kind of end up traumatizing and hurting him and playing a role, I think, into being who he is right now and all that's kind of going on there. But him and Moose are hitting it off, and Moose wants to kind of rekindle what they had before, because Moose like, yeah, I want to apologize for kind of abandoning you. So you know, I think it is almost that thing of like, right, if you've gotten abandoned in some shape or form, you kind of, those character and aspects will kind of perpetuate, and you'll kind of like, you know, he's been abandoned, so he ends up abandoning other people and not really being there for him. But he ends up having that nightmare about the gargoyle. So a lot of that trauma is still there, and he hasn't properly dealt with it. So now I don't know whether that's just a Kevin thing on its own, or whether that has some correlation to deal with. The fact is that Percival like is taking control of his mind, and so a lot of that's bubbling to the surface because of it. Because this episode made it seem like, okay, so Kevin wasn't as enthralled in Percival's whole thing as like Alice or Frank is. So, but when it was all said and done, Kevin calls up Fangs, is like, right, I want to work this out. We can do this whole co-parenting thing. Fangs is like, you know what? Bump that. Screw you, Kevin. The fact of the matter is, I don't care what brought about this epiphany. You brought it here. We can go. You want to smoke? You got all the smoke, bro. Better watch your back. It's like, yo, I'm sure Tony won't be too happy about that, because it's like, sadly, like if the Falk I don't know, it's a give and take, because the Falk situation allowed Kevin to change his mind, but the Falk situation also allowed like the rage inside of Fangs to kind of become like overtake him, so he's not going to like be willing to listen to Kevin. Like, even if they had gotten Kevin there, maybe they could have convinced him. I think we still would have been at an impasse, and things would be where it is regardless. I don't know, but I think Tony ain't going to be too happy about it. It's like, no, we had a chance to keep everything copacetic. It didn't have to get nasty, and you pushed it to that. We had an opportunity. Once again, our conversation was about doing what's best for baby Anthony, but for Fangs is like, no, I'm not going to have someone threaten to take me away from my child, or take my child away from me. It's like, that child needs its father, and I'm not going to let you take that opportunity away from me. So many fascinating elements. It's definitely going to be interesting to ultimately see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode, because I did forget the most important little detail before I end this, is the fact is that our boy Percival is now mayor. All the moves that he made, because yeah, Tabitha might not have been there, but the other the three main members, other members of the council were Percival, Frank, and Alice, all of which, oh, let's dissolve this and make him mayor. Yay! No election or anything. We just made this decision unilaterally. Yay! Because who's going to fight against me? Because Percival has the power to control people's minds. Yay! So now they've got to prepare themselves, because now things have swayed this way. So the question now becomes, how do they prepare for this? Where do things go from here now that Percival has all this power? I mean, Betty says it best. He's literally in the same position that Hiram was in when he was basically on the verge of destroying this town. So we saw what happened there. Now we have someone who Hiram had his power and position and the money to do what he needed to do to sway people to his side. Percival doesn't even need that. He has literal superpowers to get in people's head to sway them to his side. So it's going to be interesting to see where the next episode takes us. But really, that's all I'm going to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.